Got a little spicy last week, guys. We had an interesting post on Instagram that blew up in a way that I did not really think that it was going to blow up in. I'll go into more detail about that today. We also had a great past couple weeks. My family and I went to Massachusetts, so I have some things to update you there too. And then I was also a sponsor for a very, very, very old friend of mine that I'm going to talk about as well. So without further ado, welcome back to the Frankie D'Astoli Show. All right, guys. Well, I hope that you enjoyed last week's video. Last week, instead of dropping a typical, regular, the Frankie D'Astoli Show where we talk about a particular topic like we're going to do today, and like we've done consistently in the past, I actually held an interview. And I had mentioned this a couple of weeks ago on the show that we were going to be starting a new series within the Frankie D'Astoli Show called Furthering the Faith, where I get in the trenches, I sit down with Catholics, with Christians, and I talk to them about where they are in their faith journey and where they hope that it will come. Now, I had a really good friend of mine on, Joe Welke. He is a good friend of mine just in general, but he's also a business friend of mine. He's my real estate lender. He lends on a lot of my projects. He works with a great company called Renovo Financial. I highly recommend them for anybody that's looking to get into real estate. And if you know that about me, you know that I invest in real estate. You know that I have a portfolio of rental properties. Renovo Financial is a huge piece of why I've built the portfolio the way that my partner Steve and I have built it. But Joe's also just a good friend of mine. And he came out to a rosary and real estate event last July, so just about a year ago. And that was a huge pivotal point in his faith. Since then, he's come to more rosary and real estate events. Him and I have gone to confession together. We've gone to daily mass together. He's had this overwhelming transformation once again. He was always a Catholic, but not a practicing Catholic. So now he's fully come back to his faith. He's in mass every single Sunday, and he's just truly a brother of Christ in mine. So if you're interested in hearing about that, I titled it Real Estate and Real Faith. Go back and take a listen to that show. That's the first of many interviews that I'm going to be doing. I have another one dropping next week as well with a good buddy of mine, Martino, who's also in the real estate space. So I'm very excited for that. If you know anybody who you think would be a great fit for the interview, definitely let me know. At this current moment, I am only doing them in person. So if you live in the New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Delaware area, we definitely can make something work. Even New York, it might be a little bit of a drive, but if you're willing to make the drive and you got a great story, I'm definitely down to hear you talk about it. So if you have anybody in mind that you think would like to be on the show, by all means, feel free to send them my way. But I really enjoyed making the podcast, and we got another one coming out, and they're a lot of fun and having these conversations. And it's great because, Joe and I talk all the time. I mean, we literally talk multiple times a week, but just getting in there and listening to him talk in the way that he did, and even afterwards when I watched it back, I was like, wow, like that's some really moving stuff. And I think it was a great episode. So if you haven't watched it, go back and give it a listen. In conjunction to that, I took a clip from that episode and I posted it on my Instagram, and it popped off pretty well, but it didn't necessarily get the response that I thought it was going to get. I actually had a lot of controversy on the post. And the interesting is I'm used to the controversy. And I actually even talk about it in the episode with Joe and I say, that's fine. I'm used to people in my comment section saying you're going to hell when I tell people to go to the Blessed Virgin Mary to go closer to Jesus Christ. I'm used to that stuff, right? That's never anything that at this point now I've gotten the thicker skin for it. This one was kind of interesting though, because the post itself was a clip from a conversation that Joe and I were having where I was talking about, quote unquote, making, Catholic cool again. And when I had said this, my intention behind this was not ill intention at all. Like I was saying this with absolute, respect and love for my Catholic faith. But the way that it was taken, where people were thinking that I was saying Catholicism is not cool. And that's absolutely not what I was saying. What I was saying is when I said it and when I clipped it, the clip was basically like, there's something really cool about someone who, is walking around and showing their faith. And you look at that person, you're like, wow, like that person looks like they have their life together and they're Catholic. Like that's awesome, right? And I think if you look at someone like Pope John Paul II, like Pope John Paul II made being the Pope cool. Like he was cool. The guy was cool. He had this gravitas, this aura to him. He was cool. Now, Does that mean that the same faith that Pope John Paul II has is different than the faith that, the single mother who's just trying to get by and, going into adoration when she is just getting a few minutes to do so in between working two jobs? Is she less Catholic because she's not as cool as Pope John Paul II? No, obviously not. And that's not what I was referencing, right? My reference to that entire post was actually related to the topic that we talked about in the last Frankie D'Astoli show, said that 70% of Catholics are, leaving the faith, right? And the point in that, if you actually boil down that statistic, is the actual number is 79% of Catholics leave the faith between the ages of 13 to 23. So when you look at that, what years are those? Those are high school and college years. Why are they leaving the faith? Two reasons. A, because their parents no longer have the same control over them that they once did. And you can, in conjunction to that, say that they're out of CCD at that time, right? And they've gotten confirmation. That's the point. 13, you're getting confirmation. Now, after that, kind of that spiritual growth. A lot of people think at confirmation, that's it, it's capped, but that's really just the beginning. But they don't see it that way, right? They're saying, cool, I went through CCD, I got confirmation, I picked my confirmation name, and now I'm good. Now I'm focused on high school and I'm focused on college, and that's where they fall off. The other layer to that, in my opinion, the more in-depth layer, and what I was actually getting at, is they don't look at it as cool. These 13 to 23-year-old kids do not look at it as cool. What they see as cool is they see the rappers, they see the sports stars, they see the actors, the business executives, guys like, Jeff Bezos and these other bigger shot guys. And they see, the basketball players, the baseball players, the actors, all of these people. That's what they see as cool. So they don't see, oh, wow, going to mass on Sunday and receiving Jesus Christ in the Eucharist. They don't see that as cool. They see, oh, cool, going to the parties and getting the girls and making a lot of money like Andrew Tate and driving a nice car. That's cool. That's what they're seeing. That's what I'm talking about we're up against. Not that Catholicism isn't cool. Catholicism is the coolest. There's nothing better. What's cooler than following Jesus Christ, the way, the truth, and the life? There's nothing cooler. The problem is the kids 13 to 23 aren't seeing that. They're not seeing that. So when I say it's cool to see somebody who's got their life together, who's got a beautiful spouse, who's got kids, who, is well dressed, and at the same time they're Catholic, the kids that are looking up to the materialistic level of things and see somebody have that, but also see that they're Catholic, makes them realize there's another element to being cool. It's not just about the cars. It's not just about the girls. It's not just about, the clothes. There's something else. And that's what I was referring to. And that's where I was getting so much heat on this post, because people were taking it as me saying the Catholic faith is no longer cool. That's absolutely not the truth. It's always been cool. There's nothing cooler than it. The problem is the way that the world works, people see the materialistic things first. They have to dig deeper. So if we're able to combine those two together, I'm not saying that the materialistic thing needs to be in conjunction with the Catholic faith. It's absolutely not what I'm saying. I'm not saying you have to be someone who, wears the Catholic faith on the sleeve to be cool. I'm not getting at any of that stuff. What I'm essentially saying is these kids, we're losing these kids. We're losing these kids to these other people that are in the spotlight. And that is part of the battlefield. That's part of the battleground. We need to understand that. If we are going to evangelize, if we are going to fight back against evil, if we are going to convert souls, we need to understand the battleground that we are fighting. This is a war. Whether you want to believe it or not, this is a war that we're in. We need to know the enemy. We need to know where his strongholds are, and we need to attack those strongholds and take ownership. That's how we win the war. And the 13 to 23-year-old crew is the future of America and the world. That is the future of faith. Those 13 to 23-year-old kids. What they inherit and what they take in those 10 years is going to determine basically the future. Because if they become devout, if they become Catholic, if they say, wow, I can live my life as a young adult, I could have a good time, and I could still be Catholic, and I could grow deeper in my faith. And this isn't some sort of like, I need to be locked and not doing anything, and I need to, be I can't make any mistakes, and this is what it is, and my parents were always so strict on me, and they forced me into CCD, and now I don't want any part of that, so I'm not even going to look at that. If we get them out of that, and we get them to realize, listen, you could still have a great life, you could still be young, you could still experience things, and you could live a good life, but you need to be rooted in your faith, right? If we could get them to that level to still have it, right? And they don't have to be fully, there's a great saying out there, every saint was a sinner, and every sinner it could be a saint. I think it's Saint Augustine. I'm definitely botching it a little bit, and I want to make something clear. I'm not saying for the youth to go out there and to go do what I did, which is go be in a fraternity and go do stupid things and still call yourself a Catholic. That's not what I'm getting at. But the point that I'm getting at is we need to show them that you don't need to be someone who is locked in a room to be a Catholic. And we need to win that battle. We need to win those 10 years for those kids, because if they're devout, if they're Catholic, if they're focused, that is going to lead to more fruitfulness on the back end. That's going to lead to strong Catholic families. But if they're not, if they go and they chase fame and they chase money and they chase drugs and they get into sports betting and they get into smoking weed because the government's legalizing it everywhere and they're doing all of these things, they are going down the wrong path. We are done. We are done. So when I say make Catholic cool again, I'm going to say it one more time for everybody that was hating on me. I'm not saying the Catholic faith is not cool. I'm not saying the Catholic faith is not cool. What I'm saying is we need to change the perspective of these kids who are falling off from the Catholic faith between 13 and 23 to let them know that it is cool, to show them that there's nothing cooler, that the person that you look up to, it's not Andrew Tate, it's not, I don't even know sports that much anymore, Joel Embiid, right? It's not Jackson Dart. I think that's the quarterback's name on the Giants, right? It's none of those guys. It's Jesus Christ. It's him. He's the person you look up to. There's no one that walked this earth in more of a manly way with great gravitas and swagger than our Lord and Savior. So that's what we need to do. So that's it. I'm going to wrap it there for that particular point. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, you can go on my Instagram and look at that page. I literally had to put out a statement because people were coming at me. I mean, it's interesting. I never enjoy bringing diversity in Catholics. It's absolutely the last thing that I want to do. And I think that's why that post hit me so much, was because I was like, wow, did I put out a post that actually has caused diversity in the Catholic faith? And by diversity, I mean, not diversity, it's probably not the best word, more division. And I had to put out literally like a statement. I literally had to pin a comment to my post for people to realize what I was trying to get at, because it was just like people were ripping on me. And a lot of people were ripping on me personally. They were like, oh, wow, this kid's smoking a cigar. He thinks he's cool. The cigars were in the shot regardless. We were smoking cigars from the moment the podcast started. You could literally see it. So it's not like I was like, oh, we're going to talk about Catholics being cool. Let's light up some cigars. It's just so funny the way people operate with some of these things. And then you have other people literally calling me gay on the thing. Meanwhile, if they click my page, I have a wife and 2 kids and a third on the way. So I don't know, but whatever. In any regard, if you're curious about the post, you can go take a look at it. Next, we had a great time in Massachusetts. Quick little segment. We went down there. We did a couple days in Boston. Let me tell you, if you have young kids, Boston was a great time. Truly a great time. I'm used to Philly. I'm used to New York. I would choose Boston as a city to walk around with my kids in 10 times out of 10. I mean, it was unbelievable. Great area. Super nice, super clean. There's not even trash cans on the corners because people aren't just throwing stuff on the floor. So there's no reason to even have the trash cans there. It was so clean. Great city vibe, not touristy at all. My wife was looking for a Boston sweatshirt. We literally couldn't find it. It's in New York where all these stores are I Heart NY, and you have all these people buying things and they're getting all of these tourist things and they're bringing it back. There was none of that in Boston. Literally none of it. We literally had no opportunity to buy anything. I was maybe I'll buy a Red Sox hat. That's kind of cool. I'll just have it. You know what I mean? I couldn't even find anything. So, but I loved it. It was great. We started early. We did this nice river walk. We took the stroller out. We walked around over there. Then we did a coffee spot. There was another park that we brought the kids to. And then after that, we got some food at this place. I think it was called the Salty Pig. And then we did 2 museums. We did the Boston Children Museum. So fun. You could spend a full day in there. If you have young kids, you could spend a full day in the Boston Children's Museum. And then after that, we went to the Ice Cream Museum, and that was absolutely worth it. I think the tickets were like $25 a person. It was a great time. Unlimited ice cream. Literally, the kids could eat as much ice cream as they want. So it was a great time. And then after that, we went to dinner. Legal seafood, I think it was. I got the swordfish. First time eating swordfish. I liked it. It was good. What did they have that was really good there? There was something else that we were eating that was really good. But it was a great time. Great scenery right on the water. Awesome. We loved it. Next day we left. We stopped in Lowell, Massachusetts. We went to the shrine of St. Joseph the Worker. Really, really cool. Walked in, saw the pastor like right away. And ironically, you know, my wife's pregnant. She's 27 weeks tomorrow. The pastor was like, "Oh, are you pregnant?" And she was like, "Yeah, yeah." And he had St. Gerard like medal and coin on him, which was just so crazy because like, what are the odds that he was holding that? And that my wife and I were in this moment in Lowell, Massachusetts, bump into when we get that. So that was really sweet. That was awesome. He said a little prayer for the baby and for our family. And then it was great. There's beautiful statues in there. There's a great statue of Our Lady of Lourdes in there with a rock from the actual grotto in France, Lourdes, France. So we were able to touch that. That was really nice. Another beautiful statue of St. Anne and the Virgin Mary as a child. Such a cool statue to pray in front of. Really nice. And it was a great church. It was a beautiful church. Nice little gift shop too. I'm a sucker for a gift shop, so that was great. And then after that, we went to Stockbridge, Massachusetts. And this was the real reason why we were going to Massachusetts. In Stockbridge, there is a church out there and a particular priest that I very much wanted to see. The church is the Shrine of Divine Mercy, and the priest is Father Chris Alar. If you are unfamiliar with Father Chris Alar, if you like the Frankie D'Astoli show, I will probably lose you as an audience to Father Chris. And I'm happy to. I'm very much happy to. He is in my top 3 of people that I listen to on a regular basis. His talks are great. He does something called Explaining the Faith. He comes out with a show every single Saturday, and he does them in person for the most part. So that's why we were going. We got there on Thursday. We stayed Thursday night, Friday night, and Saturday. We left Saturday night. And we went to daily mass there on Friday. We walked around the grounds, huge grounds, so many amazing things. They have these unbelievable statues that you could follow for the Stations of the Cross, all 14. I posted it on my Instagram. I'm sure if you've seen that, definitely if you haven't, take a look. But it was beautiful, huge, like life-size statues of these things. It was unbelievable. And then we did daily mass on Friday, and then Saturday we came back for the talk, and I got to meet Father Chris, and I got to listen to him talk in person. Special shout out to my wife for taking the kids for an hour and a half and bringing them to the downstairs room. Now, the downstairs room, if you have kids and you want to go see this, you should absolutely do it because the downstairs room is big. It's got a bunch of tables. You could set them up with their snacks and their drawing or whatever. And it has a huge screen so you could watch the Explaining the Faith talk from Father Chris Alar that's happening right above you. So if you have kids, I would recommend it. We went to Boston first, stayed there for 2 nights, boom, went over to Stockbridge, stayed there for 2 nights, and it was definitely really awesome. And then I came back that Saturday night, and the next day I had my friend Sarah. I was her sponsor as she was receiving Holy Communion for the first time and being confirmed. She was a baptized Catholic, but she had since then fallen away from the faith. She moved to Miami. She was probably in her early 20s at that point, and basically became a Protestant. And her and I had a conversation back in February. After that conversation, the Holy Spirit moved. She had this reconversion. She immediately started calling Catholic churches, and she was on the path to receiving communion and getting confirmed on Pentecost. And we did that, and I was her sponsor. And I'm going to be breaking that down shortly. But before we do that, I want to make 2 announcements. First announcement is Rosary and Real Estate, my company, my organization, where we talk about building generational wealth through real estate investing and also growing in spiritual poverty through the Catholic faith, is hosting a free webinar on June 16th. And the webinar is called The Sacred Heart Investor. If you probably are familiar with, but maybe you aren't, the month of June is the month of the Sacred Heart of Jesus. And there's a lot that goes into that. So on this webinar, we are going to talk about the 12 devotions to the Sacred Heart of Jesus, what the Sacred Heart of Jesus emphasizes and shows, how it's God's mercy coming out for us. his love for us. And then we are going to also talk about the 12 steps you need to take to buy your first or next real estate deal. This is a totally free event. This is a free webinar. It's happening June 16th at 6:30 p.m. Eastern time. So feel free to jump on. I will add the link to sign up in the show notes. In conjunction to that, let's hear an announcement from one of our show sponsors before we continue with the episode. Today's show sponsor is Roman Catholic Gear. If you are in the market for a good rosary, I cannot recommend Roman Catholic Gear enough. Their rosaries are extremely durable, well made, and my personal favorite is they mimic and replicate the World War I rosary that was issued by the US government. Can you believe that? The US government literally issued rosaries to soldiers in World War I, and you have the opportunity to pray with a rosary that replicates that. And again, attached with that is spiritual warfare, right? So you get to pray with this rosary. It's very spiritually strong. They're extremely durable. As someone who has 2 little kids and they're constantly pulling at them, they do not break, which is awesome. And something that's really cool is when you order through RomanCatholicGear.com, you could have your rosary delivered in this spiritual ammo kit, which also is really cool just to open up, but it makes for great decor in your office or in your home. So if you head to RomanCatholicGear.com, you could use my code Frankie10 for 10% off your order. So I really thought, and I was naive here. I really thought that, I knew every Catholic church was not created, or was, I should say this, every Catholic church is created equal, right? The Catholic Church is the body of Christ, it's the spouse of Christ. But when I went to be the sponsor for Sarah, I really had my eyes opened. I had my eyes opened here. And just to give you a little background on Sarah and I, we used to train karate together probably about 15 years ago. So I'm 29 years old now. I started karate when I was 6 years old, and I stopped training at about 23. When I went away to school at 18, I was back and forth. When I was home for winter break and I was home for summer break, I was still training. And then when I graduated in 2019 and I was 22 years old, I was still training kind of on and off a little bit for about a year. And then when I was definitely in my 24 and 25 years, I moved down to South Jersey. And from there, I have not trained karate often. I've trained jiu-jitsu a little bit. And I've actually just recently gotten back into jiu-jitsu. Ever since I had kids, it's been hard to kind of stay consistent. But I trained karate for a long time. And Sarah actually used to train at the karate school that I was in as well. So I feel like when we were around like 12, 13, 14, maybe 15 years old is when we trained together. And I knew Sarah, I knew her mom, great people. And around 15, maybe 16 years old, that's kind of where it stopped. Like I just never really saw her again. After, especially when I went to school, she might've stopped training a little bit before that. I never really saw her. And about a year and a half ago, maybe even a little bit less, maybe about a year ago, I think she followed me on Instagram and she might've DM'd me, and the DM was business related because keep in mind, remember, on Instagram am Frankie D'Astoli _REI. When I started my Instagram, I talked about real estate investing. I didn't even talk about the Catholic faith. Like I was Catholic and I never had an issue with like saying that. And especially when I came out with Rosary and Real Estate, which was shortly after I started the page, I started talking about Rosary and Real Estate, but it was mainly real estate related stuff. So when she had reached out to me, it was business related. And then I started posting a lot about the Catholic faith. And then she invites me on a podcast that she was conducting. And on the podcast, she likes to get spicy. So she's talking about things that are going on in the political realm, X, Y, and Z. And I just start popping off about the attack on the family. And that's where it started. So when I started talking about that, afterwards, when we finished the pod, her and her mom was there. It was great. And, they were just like in awe about the things that I was saying. And everything that I was saying was, you got to keep in mind, like, this is just stuff that I've read, right? Father Calloway, Taylor Marshall, like, these are all things that are absolutely true and make sense. Father Chris Alar. This is what they say. This is what I believe. This is what I know is happening. And I think they were very moved hearing it, and it drew them to the Catholic faith. And I knew that she was Protestant. So about not even a week later, she texts me and she was like, I have just a lot of questions about Catholicism, a lot of stuff I don't agree with. And I was supposed to meet with her in February, mid-February. And she had texted me, this was maybe beginning of February. So about like 2 to 3 weeks out. And I was like, hey, yeah, like, definitely listen, when we sit down and have coffee, like bring those questions. And then it kind of dawned on me. I was like, man, like, that's just not the way I should do this. Like, she's asking for my advice and my opinion on Catholic faith. I need to talk to her sooner. I can't wait 2 weeks when we have a meeting. So I basically was like, listen, compile all your questions and let's jump on a Zoom tomorrow. We did that. We were on the Zoom for about 90 minutes. And of course, she was bombarding me with questions, right? Why aren't priests married? That's cruel. They should be married. That's messed up. All these, we're called to go out and multiply, and you're stopping these priests from doing it. What's up with Mary? It seems like Catholics worship her. Why are you praying to the saints? They can't hear us, blah, 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 blah. Just the regulars, right? The regular Protestant type of questions that I'm getting. And again, as I always say, and I'm planning on dropping more stuff on apologetics soon. No one wins an argument. You want to just stay calm, cool, collected, ask questions back. Cool. You have this question. Cool. Let me ask you this perspective, right? Well, why aren't priests married? Well, you tell me. If a priest is married, and he has children, he needs to provide for those children, right? So it's kind of hard for him to take a vow of poverty if he does that. Also, if someone is, saying something against the faith, and he realizes that if he speaks out against that person and defends the faith, that, his children might be somewhere caught in that line of fire, is he definitely, going to do that? No, not necessarily. Can he be 100% a priest and administer to the sacraments and administer and be on call all the time to go to somebody if they need the anointing of the sick, or to be able to drop at a dime and go help somebody in need, while also having to provide for his family and make money to put food on the table for his family and do those things? And when you start asking these questions, you're not saying this in a you're stupid, like, why aren't you understanding this? You're saying this from a perspective because they just haven't heard it, right? A lot of these Protestants have not heard this. The people that are preaching to them are married with kids, so they don't understand it. And after about 90 minutes of having conversation and breaking down those questions and going through it, we end up hanging up. And she texts me. She's like, I'm doing more research, blah, 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 blah. About 48 hours go by. She's like, yeah, I want to be a Catholic. And that's where it started. And we talked about, cool, go to, this church near you and talk about how to be a Catholic, blah, 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 blah. And at this point, it was in February. So we had just entered Lent, and she found a place probably about 15, 20 minutes from her, and about 15, 20 minutes from me as well, that would get her in for Pentecost. She would get Holy Communion and be confirmed at Pentecost. Now, you might know this. Most people, they get their sacraments if they're, a convert, or they're coming back to the faith. Maybe they were baptized like Sarah was, and she's getting those last two. They usually will get them on Easter Vigil, right? And they go through the OCIA program, and they're, taking classes once a week. And there's this whole spiritual preparation for them to be, to receive baptism, to receive the Holy Eucharist, to get confirmed on Easter Vigil. Because Sarah was coming in a little bit behind the eight ball, she had to, maneuver a little and try to find a church that would assist her here. And this one particular church did. So, as I had mentioned, I come back from Massachusetts, and I am her sponsor. And I didn't have to do anything. Truthfully, if you're wondering, what does it take to be a sponsor? If someone's going through the OCIA program, you have to show up a few times. But it is 100% rewarding. I really recommend being a sponsor for people. You're bringing souls to God. You are acting as a gratuitous grace. The Holy Spirit is working through you, connecting with that other person, and you're bringing them to Christ to be united, in his church. There's nothing more special. It's very beautiful. It's an amazing thing that you could do. And our Lord loves it, of course, right? So if you could be a sponsor, I highly recommend being a sponsor. There's not a ton that's required of you. So I show up with my family. We all show up. And again, I want to set the scene here. The church that I go to, so I go to a Novus Ordo. Let's break this down real fast. There's the Novus Ordo Mass, and there's the traditional Latin Mass. The traditional Latin Mass is the old rite, all right? And what that means is this was going on, I think, from 1560s, somewhere around there, basically up until the 1960s, Vatican II, where the Novus Ordo Mass came out. Now, the traditional Latin Mass majority of it is in Latin, hence traditional Latin Mass. There's also other things. The priest faces ad orientem. He faces the altar, right? So if this is the altar, let's just imagine my desk right here is the altar, and the camera that's in front of me here is the tabernacle. I am the priest. I am facing the tabernacle. This is the altar. That's how it looks. The laity, the people in attending the Mass, are behind me. So my back is to them. That's how it is in the traditional Latin Mass. Versus the Novus Ordo, it's opposite. So if I'm the priest, here's the altar, the tabernacle is behind me, and the laity, the lay people, are in front of me. The audience is in front of me. That's a difference between the Novus Ordo. The traditional Latin Mass is a lot more, as we said, it's in Latin for sure. But there's also differences in regards to how the structure is, right? There's nuances in the Novus Ordo that isn't in the traditional Latin Mass. Now, something that is the same for both of them is the transubstantiation, right? The Holy Eucharist is still the same. Nothing is different there. The way that Christ comes down and fully embodies the bread is the same in the traditional Latin Mass and the Novus Ordo, right? They're just different forms of the same Mass, right? The Mass is the ultimate prayer. So imagine it as the same, aspect of the sacrificial Mass, but just the prayer is a little bit different. One is not better than the other, although some will say that the traditional Latin Mass is better and the Novus Ordo is better. In my opinion, one is not better than the other. It's more so a matter of what you prefer. Now, I will be the first to say this. I think if I went to the traditional Latin Mass 4 to 5 times, I would prefer the traditional Latin Mass. And if it wasn't for the church that I was going to right now, I would push to do it. And I would tell Christina and the kids and say, cool, we're going to go do this. And we went one time. I very much enjoyed it. If you have no idea what's going on, which we had no idea what was going on, it was kind of interesting. I can understand why some people might be turned off from it, but I think personally you need to give it like 5 good times. Now, the church that we go to is a Novus Ordo Mass, but we go to what's called a high Mass. So there's differences. There's low Masses and high Masses. In our high Mass at our church, they play a lot of Latin music. And I love that because I love Latin. They play a lot of Latin music. It's still very reverent. Our pastor, he is an unbelievable man. He's a very reverent man. There's communion rails. These are all things that we're going to talk about shortly. But there's 2 different types of Masses. There's the Novus Ordo and there's the traditional Latin Mass. The Novus Ordo is the Mass. The traditional Latin Mass is the former Mass. And I don't say that with any disrespect. Believe me, I love the traditional Latin Mass. I want to go more often. But what I'm saying is the Novus Ordo is what the Mass is considered now. So if you go to a church, 90% of the chance it's going to be a Novus Ordo Mass. There's still traditional Latin Mass going on out there. So the church that we go to is a Novus Ordo Mass, but it's a very reverent Novus Ordo Mass. And I love it. And I love our priest and I love my church. And I'm very happy there. My wife's very happy there. And we love what we're a part of. So when we walk into this church, I was like, man, this is pretty crazy. This is really interesting stuff. So I get there and I had to show up about 15 minutes early, myself and the wife and the kids. And I meet the pastor and cool priest, very, very good guy. Talking about cool, right? But like a very good priest. I liked, the way he carried himself. He looked like a good man. Firm handshake. I always kiss the priest's hand when I see them. The reason that is because their hands are consecrated. It touches the Holy Eucharist. It actually is holding the bread while it transubstantiates. So I kiss priest's hands when I see them. I think it's a very reverent thing to do. And you never know what you're going to get with some of these priests, right? But he very much enjoyed that. He was like, wow, thank you so much, X, Y, and Z. So we get there early, and Sarah's there with her mom. And, we walk in and there's barely anybody in here. So I don't even know really what's going on. And then the crowd starts coming in. And the best way to say this, it just seemed kind of flat. Like it seemed really, really flat in there. Everybody was very much older. It was a boomer church. And that's not a knock on boomers. It's not a knock on the elderly in absolutely any regard. It's just there was like nobody young in that church. And then you have altar servers and they're older women. One of them is wearing like a, mask. It wasn't like an N95, but it was kind of like that. There was no like altar boys, it was really just like not a lot of youth in there. It's very much kind of like circular. So when you see a lot of these newer churches, these more, millennial type churches, they're more like kind of arcing and circular. It's more of like inviting. It's not so much like kind of, 2 rows like it used to be in a lot of these traditional churches. It's more of like, let's flare everything out. So you have a lot of that. You had a choir that dressed up. So I kind of liked that. And the priest gave a great homily. And I just remember when Sarah was going up after he gave the homily, she had to go up. I had to go up with her. And, my wife's recording it. Sarah's mom's recording it. And there's this altar lady there and she's wearing this mask and that's in the video. And I'm like, oh man, like, and again, listen, if she was truly sick, like I understand it. But if you're also truly sick, like maybe you shouldn't be doing it. And I don't want to, again, this is not me knocking elderly or anything along those lines. It's just like now that video, Sarah's gonna have the rest of her life, and this woman's in there wearing a mask. And all this to say, does it mean that it's not true? Absolutely not. Does it mean that the mass is invalid? Absolutely not. Right? Does it mean that when we receive the Holy Eucharist, it isn't Jesus Christ? No, of course it is. But it was interesting for me to see. And in my church, there's just a lot of differences. So it was an amazing experience. I loved being Sarah's sponsor. I'm so happy that she was able to get into the Catholic faith at the time that she did. And now she even sees, she's like, listen, I got to go find a younger church. And that's the truth, right? And that church with that crowd, and they have probably, I'm sure, a good community, that's still great. The topic of the rest of this podcast episode here is what you need to look for to find a church that's right for you. That's what we're going to be focusing on. So, and I have broken this down into 5 points. And as I was talking about on that story, I didn't want to give away too much because I'm going to be breaking this down here, right? So if you are a new Catholic, or maybe you're in a similar situation like I actually was. So in 2023, my wife and I moved to South Jersey, and we went to a particular church that was right around the block from us. And that was the first place we saw, so that's where we went. And we loved it. It was great. It had a handful of the things that I'm going to describe here, but most of all for me that it had, especially as a younger, at that point, 2023, we're talking almost 3 years ago from when we were there. I was Catholic, but I wasn't nearly as devout and reverent as I am now. I was still growing as I am now, still growing in my Catholic faith. But when we went to that church, the thing that it had that I really loved out of all of those things is 2 things. A, great pastors, right? Or I should say great pastor and great priests. The main pastor, he was awesome. Older gentleman, but good guy, loved his community, loved his church. He was there for a decade. Everybody there loved him. And then the second the priest, he was a recent convert, went through seminary, and he was so passionate. He talked about the dense topics, and I love that. They also had a permanent deacon there who was the best. Great man, a husband, a father, but a deacon, great man. Loved him. We loved that group of 3 guys there. Those 3, that team was top tier. Second to that, great community. Great community. Everybody there loved me and my wife. We were kind of the young couple that was there. You know what I mean? There were a couple other young couples, but not really that many. We had just had our daughter, so everybody loved that. They were all kind of like goo goo gaga over Bernadette. And just a good community. Very much enjoyed the community. They would have a summer event all the time. They were involved in, the parish was involved in community events. So it was a great community. And then in 2024, things changed. The diocese shifted priests. Our main pastor left. A new pastor came in, and me and my wife just could not jive with it. It was a pastor who everything was kind of a joke. He was, trying to crack a joke every, time he was doing his homilies. It just wasn't the same. It wasn't the same. And he came in and started making some changes that we weren't huge fans of, and we realized that we needed to make a shift. At that point, we had also moved. So for a church that was only 2 minutes around the block for us, now was 20 minutes. So there was a difference there in proximity as well. So we started looking for other churches. And we went to this one other church. It was called St. Joseph. I loved that because St. Joseph's, one of my patron saints. So I was excited about that. And we went there, and again, awesome priest. Church was pretty, very picturesque for like a baptism, but not super like reverent and traditional. More of that kind of arcing view, a little more of a millennial look. Great priest, not the best crowd for us. We were by far the youngest in there. Not a lot of young people. And again, talking statistics in the beginning of the show, this isn't super surprising, right? We're not expecting to be the majority as young parents with children in church today, unfortunately. But we were definitely in the minority, and we were at the bottom of the boat. The crowd was just a little weird. I remember like people were just like staring at us the entire mass. It was getting weird. I was like, I'm sketched out. Like, and I'm getting paranoid. I'm like, are these guys like looking at my wife? Like, what's going on here? My wife dresses very modestly in church, so it's not even like it's anything scandalous. But I'm like, this is getting weird. It's getting annoying. So I was like, I did Exodus 90. A lot of the guys went to this particular church, and I was like, man, I want to go there. Like, we should try it. I had only been in the adoration chapel there, and it was a beautiful adoration chapel. So we go to a mass there, and we walk in and we're like breathtaking. The church is beautiful, beautiful. Not like over the top, like a shrine or a basilica, right? Where it's like I could spend hours in the church exploring, but just like you walk and you're like, wow, like this is beautiful. It's a beautiful church. And then there's other things about it, right? There's great statues. There's, more things in regards to these things that I'm going to talk about with you guys right now. Like this is what you should look for in a church. So let's start with this one. First level is the appearance. So if you walk into a church, here's a few things and again, this, I just want to preface, this is all my personal opinion. This is not in the catechism of the Catholic Church. This is nothing that Jesus Christ says. This is Frankie D'Astoli's opinion of what you should look for in a Catholic church if you are on the hunt for your future parish. First is appearance. When you walk in, what is that feeling that you get? The Catholic faith is the one true faith, but something that it also has that a lot of Protestants don't have is it has this aura about it, this view, this beauty, this architecture, this way of uplifting the soul to heaven through the visuals of what your eyes see, right? That's part of it, right? The flesh, the body, these emotions, these things that we feel, the things that we see, the things that we hear, that all helps our soul, whether in a positive way or a negative way. The Catholic faith understands that. They understand that. So they say, wow, well, we want to make sure that the architecture, the beauty of the Catholic faith lifts the soul to heaven. So when you walk into a church, do you feel lifted? Do you feel lifted to heaven? Do you feel lighter? Do you feel better? Do you feel closer to Christ? That's what you want to ask yourself. So when you walk in, do you see beautiful architecture? Do you see good statues that are of good saints that you want to strive to be like? Do you see a beautiful altar where the tabernacle is in the center, not off to the side? If the tabernacle is off to the side, that's a bad sign. Keep it in the center. That's where it needs to be. Christ in the center, not off to the side, where the priest is in the center and the priest is doing his thing and Jesus is over here. Keep Christ in the center. So you want to look for that. That's one appearance level that you want to look for. The second appearance level that you want to look for is communion rails. This is huge. Communion rails is when you go up to the altar, there's rails, literal railings around the altar, usually in like a U shape, right? Not always in a U shape. Sometimes it's just straight across, but it's usually in like a U shape. And it'll have kneelers in front of them that you could go and you can kneel to. Why is this important? Well, when we were at this other church, when I was sponsoring Sarah, there were no communion rails, right? The altar itself was basically on the ground level too, which is another thing. You want to see the altar elevated, right? Like it's all leading towards Christ in the center, elevated up, bringing our souls up with him, right? So when there's no communion rails, I was like, snap, man. Like, well, my wife and I, we receive at communion rails and we receive on the tongue from the hand of the priest. No other way. This is my personal preference. This is not how it needs to be. There are Eucharistic ministers. Good friends of mine are Eucharistic ministers. No hate on that at all. But for me and my house, the way that we will receive Jesus Christ is on our knees in humility, on the tongue, directly from the consecrated hand of the priest. That's how we operate. That's how we like it. That's part of what I instill in my family, 100%. It's just what I believe. It doesn't mean that it's wrong receiving from a Eucharistic minister. That's not what I'm getting at. But for me, I'm here in this church that has no communion rails. And I say, all right, how am I going to receive? I'm going to receive the way that I receive. So when my wife was in the back with the kids at that point, because Francis started to lose it a little bit and Sarah had some stuff going on, we didn't want that to obviously interfere. So she brought Francis and Bernadette in the back. We were receiving communion. Sarah had received first because the priest kind of highlighted that she was receiving communion for the first time. And one of the, people there like waved me to go to the Eucharistic minister. I was like, yeah, I'm not doing that. So I stood up, I went in the back, I grabbed Christina and the children, and we walked up, and my wife was in front of me, and every single person in that church received on the hands. And again, there's nothing wrong with that. But I think here, receiving on the hands is not as reverent as receiving on the tongue. It's my personal opinion. Doesn't mean I'm right. Doesn't mean you're wrong. It's just my personal opinion. But every single person received on the hands. And it was kind of like fast food. It was like, boom, boom, boom. Throw on the hand, they walk away. Throw on the hand, walk away. Throw on the hand. there needs to be a level of reverence there. So my wife goes up, and I love my wife. She's devout. She understands it. She receives on the tongue. First person in the entire church to receive on the tongue. And then I walk up and I say, cool, I'm going to receive on the tongue. I'm also going to get on my knees. And when you're doing these things, you also just don't know how the priest is going to respond. I remember I did this in Staten Island, and the priest honestly hesitated. He did it, but it was a little bit awkward. And this priest, I knew he was a reverent man. He gave it, and I know that he appreciated what I was doing there. But you don't want to be in a position where it's like awkward. It's awkward to receive Christ on your knees and on the tongue because everybody's doing it on the hands. So if you walk into your church and you see the communion rails, that's a great sign, because what that means is the church encourages, or at least allows, you to go up and receive Christ on your knees at the communion rail, right directly on your tongue from the priest. And that's huge. You should absolutely be striving to do that. So if you see communion rails, that's a good sign. If you see beautiful architecture, that's a good sign. If you see political signs or pride flags, that's a bad sign. And that is not to say that the church does not welcome, the LGBTQ community. It's not to say that, right? The church welcomes everybody. Now, there's rules, just as there is in any household, because the church is a household, right? There's rules. If you are in a same-sex marriage, you cannot receive communion. That's a rule in the church. But it doesn't mean that you are not welcomed in the church, right, to take part and be a part of the church. So that is a thing. If you're seeing political signs, whether it's left or right, whether it's about Trump or it's about the other side or whatever it is, those are bad signs. The church should not be promoting political aspects, right? Now, politics is part of theology, right? A lot of saints have said that, right? We have an obligation to vote for the people who are, benefiting the theology and the Catholic faith, for sure. But we don't want to bring that into the churches. That's my personal opinion. Again, this is all personal opinion. So if you're seeing political signs, if you're seeing flags, I'd walk away. The last part of appearance is the crowd. Again, like I was saying, we were the minority in a lot of these previously 3 churches, and we're still the minority even in my church today, but the minority is higher there, right? There's a lot of families, there's a lot of children. It's a good thing. And I'm going to talk about crowd a little bit more in the next ones. The second one, regularly offered sacraments. So if you are looking at a church, and let's just say, so imagine this is like a checklist, right? You walk into the church, you're like, oh, cool, great architecture, communion rails, awesome, no political signs, these are positives. Next, you want to look to see, okay, where are their mass times, right? Make sure, obviously, there are good mass times that are going to work within your schedule that you could get there, because you have to go to mass every single Sunday. That's not a negotiable. But where are the other offered sacraments? Are they offering confession? How often are they doing that? My church does confession twice a week. They do it one weekday and they do it on the weekends. And I think it's good. Personally, I'd like more options, but it's good. It gets the job done, right? If you have a church that's offering it once a month, not a great sign. If you have a church where it's kind of like on request only, it's also not a great sign, because most people aren't going to request it. So you want to go to a place that has a good amount of confession times. You also want to go to a place that has adoration. Now, my church used to have 24/7 adoration. How amazing is that? You're going through something tough. A family member of yours is sick. You can't sleep. It's 2 a.m. I'm going to go spend time with Jesus Christ. Is there anything better? Literally. That's amazing. It's amazing. Now, after COVID, unfortunately, it's no longer that. But it's 5 days a week. They have it open pretty much over 12 hours a day. So that's great. So if you're looking for a church, when do they have adoration? If it's 1 day a week, that's bad. If it's every day, that's great. If they don't have it, big problem, right? And I don't know a church that doesn't have it, but I don't know. I haven't seen it all, right? So you want that confession, adoration, those options there. You also want a parish, just in general, kind of going on this point, you want a parish that makes it easy to encounter God. The sacraments are our encounters with God. It's God's grace guaranteed to us through the sacraments. We want to make sure that we're able to receive those. The third, solid, faithful preaching. I remember I always get a lot of heat from people because I would say the Mass isn't about the homily. It's not about going in and hearing the priest say something that just resonates with you and you're like, oh my goodness, I needed to hear that. Thank you so much, Father John. You saved me. It's not about that, right? It's about the Holy Eucharist. It's about receiving the body, blood, soul, and divinity of Jesus Christ, partaking in the sacrifice, being there, right? And I'd get a lot of hate for that. People would be like, oh, but a homily is great. A homily is great. Did I say it's not great? No, that's not what I said. But what I'm saying is like, I'm not going to the mass for the homily. I'm going to receive Christ. That's why I'm going, right? The homily is an added bonus. And that's why I have it in the checklist of things that you should be looking for when you are looking for a parish. You want to look for solid, faithful, sound preaching, right? A pastor who will talk about what matters. If you go and you hear the pastor talking about your soul potentially burning in hell, that is a great sign. I mean that sincerely. That is a great sign. Nothing gets me hyped more than a pastor saying, you are going to go to hell if you do not get your life in order. That's a great sign. So you want that stuff. You definitely want that. A homily should really be challenging to your soul. It should open scripture for you, right? And it should really bring you closer to Christ. The homily should be centered on Christ. If the priest is talking about recycling, or he's talking about politics, or he's talking about, universalism of like, oh, if you're a good person, you'll go to heaven. These are bad signs. These are not good for your soul. That is not good shepherding, right? And a lot of these priests have good intentions. I'm not saying that they're bad. It's definitely not what I'm getting at. But the fact of the matter is, you want to go to a church where the priest is going to challenge you. He's going to call you out on the negative things that you're doing because he cares about your soul. It's like a father watching their child eat a lot of candy, and the father's just like, hey, well, it looks like there's 1 gram of protein in this candy, even though it's got, a bunch of added sugars and, all of these, natural, whatever, unnatural flavoring. And, it's, 87% of your daily value of, your sugar intake, but it's got 1 gram of protein in it. You don't want to be that father, right? That father is not leading their kid to a healthy lifestyle. The pastor is there to lead you to a spiritual, healthy lifestyle. So find one that's going to do that. That's something that you'll have to probably just kind of experience a few times, right? So you might walk into a great parish and it's beautiful and you're like, wow, appearance wise, it hits. It's got the communion rails. This is great. They got good times for confession and adoration. And then you might have a pastor who just like, you can't understand him. I've seen this. I've experienced this. One of my cousins, his church has a really great person and a pastor, but you can barely understand what he's saying. And it's very, very hard. And again, that's why the level is you go there for the Holy Eucharist. There's no doubt about that. But at the same time, you want to be able to understand the priest, and that's tough. So that might be something that makes you think maybe I'll look for another church. Number 4 is community. And this kind of builds off of what I was saying with the crowd, right? But from the pastor to the lay people, you want to try to have a good, strong community. So who's in the pews sitting next to you, right? That's what you want to look for. Is it people like yourself, right? If you're single, right, hoping to have aspirations to start a family one day, are there other singles in the crowd with you, right? Are there families in the crowd with you, young families, right? If you're maybe a little bit older and you're entering kind of those golden years, do you have other people that are going through those experiences with you? That's all important. When I was talking about the boomer church before, that's not the worst thing. I'm not saying that that's a bad thing, right? Of course, I'd love to see some more youth in there, but that's basically every church across the world, right? So, but those people, they have in the pews next to them other people that are in similar, phases of life with them, and that's totally fine as well. But you're looking for you, right? What is for you? What do you need in your parish? Who do you need to be next to you? Is it an inviting parish? Are the people next to you inviting? Do they, say hi to you? Are they, uplifting? And the mass should be solemn, right? I'm not saying like, the person should be looking over to you during the mass and smiling at you and waving and, applauding when you receive communion. If they're doing that, just please stop. But it should be solemn, right? There's reverence there, there's prayer there, there's worship there. But after the mass or before the mass, is it inviting? Are these people inviting? One thing that for my wife and I that we really love is, a lot of people in there know us, they know our children, and they love our family. And that gives us such joy because we don't do the crying room. I don't necessarily believe in it. For me, I want my children to see what it means to be in mass. If they're acting out, I discipline based off of that. But I want them to be there. I want them to be in the presence of the Eucharist in the mass. So I don't really believe in the crying room. My wife is on the same page. And most of the time when we've gone to the crying room, it's a mess in there. The kids are freaking out, right? My kids are freaking out. They're running around. They're not listening because there's other kids in there that aren't listening. So to me, I keep them in the main room. We keep them there. And that's what we focus on. And if my kids are crying because they're young, and sometimes they do, I know that the community and the pastor who's up there preaching, they love it. They love it. If the church isn't crying, it's dying. Remember that. And the people in the church, they know that and they love that. And they want to see that because it adds to the community that they're in. If you are young parents and you have young children and you have people in the pews that are giving you dirty looks if your kid's crying, it's not a great sign. That's not a great sign. And again, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're wrong. They have a right to feel the way they feel, but they didn't sign up to grow up in a place with no kids. So I don't know why they're feeling that way. And ultimately it's very discouraging. That can discourage parents. And that honestly pisses me off. I'm not going to lie. Because if you discourage parents and you make parents feel embarrassed for bringing their kids to mass, and if you're a parent, you should never let that get to you. If you let it get to you, it's ultimately on you. But if you're a person that discouraged the parents, it's not good. It's not good in my opinion. So you want to have people in the pews that are inviting to you, inviting to your children if you have them, have children of their own, older people who have had children that have grown up in the faith and they love to see it. That's all positive things, especially for young families. And the fifth one is well-rounded opportunities for formation and service. So the Mass is not the only thing that your church should offer. We talked about it offering the other sacraments like confession and adoration for sure. But ultimately, it should offer additional things as well, like youth groups, young adult groups. You want to see those types of things. If you're not seeing young adult groups, that's not a great sign because it might be that there's not really enough there's not really a crowd for it, right? There might not be enough young adults to even have a young adult group. But if you see other things too, like group rosary, I know my morning daily mass is it's 9 a.m. And after the daily mass, they do a group rosary. So there's someone who leads it. They lead it in the crying room, actually, believe it or not. So they all go over to the crying room after, and they pray a rosary together. Whoever after the daily mass wants to stay for the rosary, that's a great thing. A Bible study, I think mine has one once a month. They do a Bible study. A strong presence of Knights of Columbus. I am a knight. If you're a young man, or even not even a young man, if you're a man in general, right? Go join the Knights of Columbus. I think it's such an amazing thing. I've loved every moment of being a knight. It's outstanding. It's more than just attending mass, right? There needs to be more. The mass is amazing, but we're talking about an hour to an hour and a half once a week. What else is your church offering outside of the sacraments to help you grow in holiness? Bible study, rosary, holy hours, things along those lines. Talks, right? I know my priest, he's always working on bringing in another priest from another part of the world to talk, to do mass, and then to have, nightly, formation classes at 7 p.m. on weekdays. Like there's so much that he's doing that you want to find. That's a great shepherd. It's a great pastor. So those are the 5, guys. We'll repeat them one more time. Appearance, right? You want to look for that architecture. You want to look for communion rails, avoid political signs. Regular offered sacraments. When are they offering confession? How often? What about adoration? Excuse me. What about adoration hour? Or adoration in general and holy hours. Solid, faithful preaching. Is the pastor talking about saving your soul, or is he talking about his own political agenda or things along those lines? The community, right? Who's in the pews next to you? Are these people that you could see yourself growing with spiritually? Are these people that you could see your kids hanging out with their kids, right? What are we looking at here? And then a well-rounded opportunity for formation and service, right? What's the Knights of Columbus look like over there? What kind of things are they doing? Are they doing rosaries, after masses? Are they doing holy hours? Are they doing Bible study? Things that are going to help fill your cup and bring you closer to Christ. One disclaimer before we wrap here, guys. I know we're getting up to the hour here. Don't go shopping for too long. This is not usually the case, But a bad church still is better than no church. And I say that to say, because if they're transubstantiating and they're offering the Holy Eucharist, you're there. You're there. Heaven is still there. Christ is still there. If you're not going to church at all because you can't find a church that works for you, you are outside of the box. You are outside of heaven. So don't not go to a church because you can't find one that works for you, right? Continue to look, but don't get caught up trying to find one that checks every single box before going. If you go to a church that has a great pastor, but maybe they don't have communion rails, you say, cool, I'm still receiving the body, blood, soul, and divinity of Jesus Christ in the Eucharist. I'm still having my venial sins washed when I go to Mass. I still have opportunities to go to confession and adoration hour here. That's great. But I would love to be able to receive at communion rail. So I'm going to keep an eye out for another Mass, and I'm going to keep looking around for other churches, and I'm going to attend some of those when I have the opportunity to. And if I feel like I'm drawn to it and it's in a distance where I could still make it on the weekends, then maybe I'll switch, right? But pick a church, become a parishioner at the church, be a part of the community, and try to find one that you could see yourself growing in, and you could see your family growing in, or you want to baptize your kids in and you want to see them grow there. So all that to say, Jesus Christ is present on the altar at every single Catholic church. Understand that. He's present at every single church on the altar. You have the opportunity to go see him everywhere that you go, whether that's Our Lady of Guadalupe, 10 minutes down the road, whether that's a shrine an hour and a half away from you, doesn't matter. He's there and waiting for you. Pray the rosary, buy real estate. Don't do what makes you happy. Do what makes you holy. Get holy or die trying. I'll see you guys soon. God bless.